Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing podcast on our Effective Marketing YouTube channel. And if you have spent any time here at all, you will know I am on a mission through this channel to provide you with what it is that you need to be more successful in your business. As far as I know, the only way to be more successful in your business is through your sales and marketing. So not only on this channel am I giving you everything I know about sales and marketing, I am pulling in anyone who can bear to talk to me to drag out from them all of their sales and marketing knowledge also. So today's guest has an engineering science and is an educate. And I'll put my teeth in, I'll say that again. Today's guest is an engineering science and economics graduate. He has been working in marketing since 1987, which I'm sure he won't mind telling you is 35 years. In that time, he has held a host of marketing management, marketing directorships, and run his own sales and marketing consultancy. He is the author of How to Price My Platypus. He is the platypus guy. Today's guest is David Abbott.
Hi, how are you?
I am extraordinarily well, thank you, David. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for inviting me to talk to you and your audience. It's great.
Thank you so much for agreeing to come and have this conversation. And I am properly excited about this because I've got views about pricing. This isn't about my views, it's about what you know, but I'm hoping you're going to confirm my views, my issues. Everything I do is kind of about getting people to think a little bit differently about the thing that they don't want to do, the sales, the marketing, the pricing in this instance. And so it seems to me that everything everyone thinks about pricing is exactly the opposite to what they should be thinking about pricing. But we will get to that. We will get to that. So that's fine. You are an incredibly busy person. I mean, I listed, before you gave me the thing about the platypus, I listed the 4 or 5 things that you are busy with currently according to your LinkedIn profile. So I am enormously grateful that you've decided to spend this hour and 15 minutes with me. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Good.
Pleasure.
Okay. Is there anything you'd like to say before we start?
No, just that I'm looking forward to talking about this too, because I wouldn't have written a book about pricing if I wasn't keen about it. So I'm looking forward to having a really good conversation with you.
Fantastic. Excellent. Okay, so the way this works is a really simple formula. There's only 5 questions. The first question is, how are you qualified to talk to us about pricing? The second question is, who are your customers? What is it you do for them? How do you add value in their lives? The third question is, what are your recommendations for people who want to get better or see some improvement in their business through pricing? The fourth question is, what do you recommend people read? And the fifth question is, who can you throw under the bus who might bear to have a conversation with me and help my minuscule audience out? So question number 1, how are you qualified, David Abbott, to talk to us about pricing?
You've mentioned a little bit there. I've been working in marketing for quite some time, and pricing is one of the classical 4 Ps or 7 Ps, whichever you prefer, of marketing. In some respects, though, it's a bit of a neglected P, which is why I've taken a specific interest in it. So, as well as all of the experience I've gained through a marketing career and applying the issues around pricing, as to any particular problems. For the last 10 years, I've been researching the psychology behind how we make pricing decisions. Partly that's research where I've actually conducted pricing experiments. Partly it's about reading the academic research to see how that decision-making process, the hidden psychological decision-making process, applies to the pricing world. And I'm fortunate to have a daughter who is a doctor of psychology, working in the NHS. So I run everything through my daughter and make sure that anything that I'm talking about from a psychological point of view is actually correct. So you do get people in marketing, different elements of marketing, some of whom come from a psychology background and apply to the marketing side of things, and some of it who come from a marketing background and looking at the psychological side of things. I've come from the latter.
Okay. So what did you call it? It's the neglected P or the.
Yeah, it seems that way to me. You go online and you go to Amazon and start looking at marketing books, and you can find any number of books about strategy. You can find loads of books about positioning and brand. You'll find anything you want about integrating marketing, marketing communications. Start looking at books on pricing, and they're there, but they're not as many, and there's a mixture between some which are fairly straightforward, almost trivial, and some which are almost academic, real heavyweights. The list of options, things that you can read to get your head around pricing is far more limited. And my experience working in a variety of organizations is that a huge amount of time is put into deciding how you're going to launch a particular product, or you're going to develop a new channel, or you're going to, I don't know, whatever it might be. The strategy side, the communication side, gets a vast amount of time and effort and focus. And pricing is almost the last thing, and tends to be a little bit of a finger in the air. It's a yeah, you can almost hear the groan. People, what are we going to go for? Because nobody wants to go in too cheap and leave money on the table, or too expensive and lose a sale. So there's this kind of angsty moment. They pick a price and then that's it, done. They don't think about it again until
Yes.
maybe a year later. Oh, it's time for a price rise. So I don't see price being treated the same way inside organizations as the rest of the marketing mix.
No, and I don't either. Here's my theory. Everybody knows
Mhm.
that pricing is a verb, but nobody thinks it is something they do. People seem to think it's something that's done to them. So basically, the
Mhm.
market decides the price, or your competitors decide the price, but it's not something you do yourself. But you and I know that adjusting your price in the right direction, up, I would recommend, is the
Mhm.
most immediate way to affect your profitability. And what I tell people is that they are 100% in control of their price. Of course, you can be reckless with it,
Mhm.
but I don't think. I mean, I've got lots of things, so I don't want to get caught up in what I'm thinking. The
Mhm.
most price sensitive people on the planet are salespeople, because I
Yeah.
don't think customers care about price anywhere near as much as salespeople will claim. Everyone knows if you want to get rid of a salesperson, you tell them it's too expensive and they will go away.
Yeah.
But and the salespeople will go away because they're looking for an excuse to go away. So this is kind of where I sit. Pricing is huge. Is something you're 100% in control of. You can be completely reckless and nobody will ever see value in what you're doing, and you may not, never sell anything. But as long as
Mhm.
I don't know, you tell me what. So you're talking about the psychology of pricing. What is the psychology of pricing?
I absolutely. I'll get into that, but just first of all, I want to agree with you. I've seen the same thing in the various roles. They include some time spent on the road, going out and visiting people, selling things to them. I would not claim to be a sales specialist or a sales expert, but I have been there at the coalface and I have some experience of it. And you're absolutely right. Price is the easiest excuse to say no to a salesperson. And as a consequence, when I've worked inside organizations, almost universally, every single time the salesperson comes back into the organization, having been out to visit a customer, the message is we're too expensive. If only we would apologize for that.
That's
So
okay.
when a salesperson comes back into the organization, the message that they're sharing is that Now, if only the pricing was cheaper, we could sell bucket loads of whatever it is, because that's what they're hearing all of the time. And I absolutely agree with you. The evidence is that when organizations lose a relationship with a customer, something like 80% of the time, it's for a non-price reason. When one half of what I do is I'm a portfolio marketing director for a number of clients. So over the past 10 years, I've worked with lots and lots of different organizations, and we've gone out to secure services. It might be a new website, it might be an exhibition stand, it might be rebranding, whatever it is. I can't think of one single instance where we've ended up going for the cheapest of the options in front of us. And that's not because we're avoiding the cheapest. It just happens that we haven't gone for the cheapest. What we've gone for each time when we've narrowed it down to 3 people who've then come in and presented to us is we've gone for the organization who understood us, who got our challenges, who related to our goals, we felt comfortable. They're going to help us achieve exactly what it is that we want to achieve. Price was then a secondary issue. And I think far too many organizations think that price is the number one issue, and that is not my experience at all. So I just wanted to say that first. Yeah, you're going to say something?
Yeah, and it's not my experience either. I mean, it's categorically not my experience. Oh God, I've got a presentation, the most powerful close in the world ever, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about selling, and we go through this thing. What I do is I get people on a rope, like a tug of war. So I get someone to suggest a buying signal. How much is it? And then the next person will come up with a response, and then response. So it's kind of like an objection handling, price objection handling thing. The thing about it is when I say, so when somebody says as an objection, it's too expensive, like what I tell people to say is, what do you mean by that? And the best time I ever did this, we came up with 20 things that the buyer might mean by the phrase, it's too expensive. So it's more than I was thinking about spending. It's more than I've got budget for. I don't have any budget for anything at the moment. It's less than what it's costing us currently. I can't go to my boss and tell him that figure. He'll have a fit, or they'll have a fit. So we came up with 20 of these things. So the truth, and one of them was, I never had any interest in what you were saying. I'm just trying to get rid of you, which is why I know that salespeople will run a mile once somebody says it's too expensive. So, and sales managers, we talk about the psychology of the buyer and pricing. You're going to talk about that. You're the expert on that. Yeah. The psychology of the seller, of course, is we're not adding value to the world. We're not worth what we're trying to charge. Occasionally we get away with it, and we should be very happy about that. But we expect to hear most of the time that we're not delivering value. So that's the kind of default human position, if you like, is, of course, I'm not worth as much as I hope to get. So I think the thing is layered on both sides. 100%, the most price-sensitive people on the planet are salespeople. The other thing that persists is this myth that if your price were lower, you would start selling bucket loads, like you've said, which is categorically not true. They're not buying because you are marginally high, or else the objection wouldn't be you're too expensive. The negotiation point would be, is there something you can do about the price to help us to make this happen? So what was I saying? So it's because you haven't presented the value in a way that they appreciate, or they haven't got the value. And like you're saying, there's so many layers to the value. These people are interested in us. They trust us. They seem to have a good reputation. They've got good testimonials. The quality of their work looks. These are all parts of the value proposition that just simply haven't been met. If somebody's telling you it's too expensive, they're not telling you you're too expensive. They're telling you they don't value what you're offering, is what I'm saying.
Exactly. And this is where the psychology starts to come in. We like to think that we're completely rational. We're the apex of evolution. We're as advanced a race as you could imagine, and we make all decisions completely logically and rationally. And in reality, 99.9 recurring percent of all of the decisions that we're taking in the day, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions. Just what I'm going to say next is an internal decision. Yeah, we're making all of these decisions subconsciously.
Yes.
And our subconscious is completely invisible, absolutely completely invisible to our conscious brain. So when we encounter a price, our subconscious does a huge amount of work in assessing, is this a reasonable price to pay? And then presents an answer to our rational brain, which then rationalizes why it was the right decision along, whether to say yes or no to that price. And that's the psychology that's happening all of the time. And it's not just with pricing, that's with any decision whatsoever. Anytime we're ever faced with a decision, there's a chunk of stuff that happens subconsciously, and then our conscious brain rationalizes why we're just about to make the right decision. You can see the evidence for that, not only all the psychological research that takes place, but even in B2B at really senior levels, you see examples of somebody whose pride means that they're chasing an acquisition, and the price starts going up, but they're going to make their mark on the world. They're going to achieve this huge organization by bringing these two companies together, and they end up pursuing it beyond the point at which it makes economic value. But as I say, pride has come into it.
And persistence and stubbornness and...
Yeah, absolutely. You get into all sorts of things. If that can happen at the very senior levels in organizations, then clearly anywhere in business and anywhere from the consumer point of view, these psychological aspects make a difference. And there's a lot of evidence backing this up. So there are many books on the psychology of how we make decisions, just in a general point of view. I'll mention one later when we get on to, I think it's question 4. The one example of this kind of decision in business is a pricing thing called anchors, an anchor. Actually, no, a better one, precision. So when we encounter a precise price, it feels smaller to our subconscious brain than a round price does. So £19.27 feels smaller than £19 does. Even though £19.27 is 27 pence dearer, it feels smaller because precise prices just feel small. But even more importantly, when we encounter a precise price, it feels like there's some logic behind it. There's some science behind it. We're less likely. So if you went to somebody.
1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. It's my evening smoothie. I will trim that bit as well.
Right. So if you went to somebody who was going to develop a website for you, and they said, "Sure, we can do that for £5,000." Well, what you've just heard is, let's lick my finger, stick it in the air. Let's guess. 5,000. That feels about right. If they say it's 5,180, it feels like there's some reason for it. But when somebody says 5,000, they're inviting you to start negotiating. Say, I was hoping for 3, because when you say 5,000, you're hinting that negotiation will take place in thousands and 500s. If you say it's 5,180, you're hinting that negotiation will take place in hundreds and tens. And if you get the "that's expensive" kind of reaction, the temptation then is for people to say, I can knock 5% off, or I can knock 10% off. Well, clearly you've just plucked another number out of thin air. If you can knock 10% off, why can't you knock 11 or 12 or 13?
Yes.
If instead you got your pad and pen paper out and you did some calculations and you looked at them and then you said, I can knock 3.9% off. Well, that feels like there's a reason. But again, if you say, I can knock 10% off, you're hinting that negotiation will take place in tens and fives. You're inviting them to say, oh, I wanted 30%. Shall we meet in the middle, call it 20? If
Yes.
you say 2.9, you're hinting the negotiation will take place in ones and point ones. And they might say, oh, well, why don't we call it 5% between friends? And you might say, okay, yes, I can cope with that. But all of those changes in the way that you approach the negotiation, you think about the price and how far away it might, if you were expecting to negotiate in the first place, all of that changes depending upon the amount of precision that's used when the price is first presented to you. Now, that sounds like a very consumer thing to do, but Harvard Business Review published an analysis of mergers and acquisitions. So these are people buying and selling companies. And it turned out the more precise a company was offered onto the market, the closer the final price was that was paid. So even in these huge mergers and acquisition deals, where you've got teams of accountants and solicitors on both sides, where you're going through a highly analytical process, even in as analytical a process as that, the more precise the initial asking price, the less negotiation took place, the closer the final price was. And that's why I think psychology is such an important aspect to all of this.
Okay, good. It's interesting that you say mergers and acquisitions, because I was involved. It was like a round table rather than a presentation, but the guy was he was involved in mergers and acquisitions and selling businesses. That's what I think he was doing. He was dressing businesses for sale. So we're sat around, there's only 5 or 6 of us around this table, and he sits down, and the first words out of his mouth, I'm not even joking, were, I've got 10 ties at home that cost £300 each. And we're all looking at each other like, who cares about this guy's ties?
Good for you.
Lovely, well done. I'm glad your life is exactly where you need it to be. But then he went on to say, but I have never spent more than £10 on a tie in my life. And the point that he was making brilliantly is that the psychology is that if you don't know anything about what you're buying, the best indicator as to the quality of that thing is the price. So these 10 ties had been bought for him as gifts. The people buying the ties didn't know anything about ties to get him the greatest tie other than the price, which is why they ended up spending £300. So the psychology, I think, this is where I think it's almost exactly the opposite, because we all think that we want to buy the cheapest, but 100% of the time we want to buy the most expensive that we can afford, because that's how we believe we are getting quality.
I agree. Price itself is a huge indicator of quality. Do you want another bit of research that I think really illustrates this beautifully?
I'm happy with research. Yes, please.
This is it's a consumer thing, but again, this applies equally well in business. Prices, it's an indicator of quality, but also an indicator of reduced risk, and that's one of the important things for business. But the bit of research was a number of people were put into a functional MRI scanner, and they were given 5 different wines. And they were told the wines were priced $5, $10, $35, $45, and $90. And they were told which one they were drinking. This is the $10 wine. They were asked to rate it. And while they were in this scanner, a part of the brain called the medial orbitofrontal cortex, it's a part of the brain that's just behind your forehead and is associated with pleasure. That part of the brain was being monitored. So when they were told it was a $5 wine, they enjoyed it a certain amount, they rated it a certain amount. $10, they rated it higher. The more expensive the wine, the more they said they enjoyed it and the higher they rated it. And indeed, while they were being measured, the more that part of the brain lit up. So it looked like genuinely they not only rated the wine higher and said they enjoyed it more, but they enjoyed the more expensive the wine, the more they enjoyed it. Except there was a fib. The $90 wine was also in the $10 bottle, and the $5 wine was also in the $45 bottle. So there were only 3 wines. So when they were told the wine was a $90 wine, they enjoyed it a certain amount. When they were told exactly the same wine was a $10 wine, they did not enjoy it as much. And that part of the brain did not light up as much. The brain was delivering what the expected experience, and the clue as to what the experience should be was the price. Well, what's interesting is the control group, because the control group were just fed 3 wines. They didn't know whether it was the $5, the 35, or the 90, and they enjoyed the $5 the most, the 35 the next, and the $90 the least. So what that says about the wine industry, you draw your own conclusions, but it really, the fact that the control group liked the $5 the most, and yet the test group, they went right. Oh, this $90 wine! Wow, it's fabulous.
Yes.
It's and they weren't just trying to be pretentious. They weren't telling fibs. That part of the brain lit up more.
Yes. And the thing is, this goes to the irrationality of this. Because when I'm trying to convince people of the opportunity of pricing, they don't want to hear, because, it's so entrenched in their head that it's the price, it's the price, it's the price. That's the problem. So what I do is I put up slides and I demonstrate how much difference people are prepared to pay. So it starts with jeans. So jeans from Asda will cost you £10, and a pair of jeans from Levi's will cost you £100, or actually £120 now.
Yeah.
So that is a 1,000% or 1,200% difference. Immediately, people will start making excuses. They're better quality, it's better materials, it's blah, 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 blah. Let's not imagine that Levi's are making their jeans in a factory very far from the factory where Asda are making their jeans, with more or less exactly the same materials. Then I go on to show them strawberries from Asda and Waitrose, and Asda, Tesco's and Waitrose. And then cars. So I show them cars from Seat, VW, Audi, and Skoda. And they're all made by the same manufacturer. They are ostensibly the same car, but the price difference is 20% or 25%. And people will say, this is the third one in, so I'm demonstrating this for the third time. People will say, oh, well, it's only 25%. On a car, it's only $2,500 difference, and so they will justify it. The best example for me is Coca-Cola. So I did this thing years ago with a customer who was a pricing consultant, and we went into Spa and we bought a 2.5 litre bottle of Coca-Cola, and we bought a can of Coca-Cola, and then we went across the road into the pub and we bought a glass of Coca-Cola. And the price, within 3 meters in the store, was very different. The price across to the pub was very different again, and it's tens of percents. Like if you buy a 2.5 litre, then I don't have the exact figures, but people are prepared to pay very different prices, is what I'm saying, depending on the location, depending on the presentation, dependent on all of these things. Yeah. But if the price of fuel goes up by 1%, it's on the national news. People paying 25% for ostensibly the same car never gets anywhere near the news or anywhere near anyone's consciousness. I'm talking too much. It's irrational, is the truth, the way people decide what they're prepared to pay for things.
No, I completely agree. And from a marketing perspective, as marketing professionals, I think you and I would describe that as the power of the brand in a lot of instances. I saw a test, on TV where the program they bought a load of Levi's, and they put them in 2 piles. In one pile, they unpicked all of the branding. They took the Levi's off it, so they were just unbranded. And they got a bunch of teenagers to say how much they pay for the various jeans. And the teenagers were prepared to pay half as much for the non-branded as for the Levi's. They were the same jeans. All they'd done it, there was no difference clearly in terms of the quality, but the brand makes a hell of a difference. And brand is so much a psychological issue. If that isn't all about the psychology of how we make decisions, what else is brand about?
Okay. And what I would say about this, because I mess with the 4Ps, the 7Ps, however many Ps they want to have.
Yeah.
For me, pricing is about positioning. It's about deciding where on the price scale you want to be.
Yeah.
And so that informs the brand, or that supports the brand, or that defines the brand relationship. We are the most expensive, we're the least expensive, we're the whatever, wherever you want to be on that scale. For me, it is just a question of positioning. And so, for example, Rolls-Royce have to be the most expensive because, but then they invest the most in the cars, but then they probably make the most margin, so for me, price is probably one of the most impactful things in a brand. Deciding what it is you're going to charge will do the most to define your brand, I think.
Yeah, I do agree. And that probably comes into your next question, I think, which was around how does this apply? How, if I was working with a client, how does this all get used? Because there's a pricing process that I can take a client through. Actually, no, let me take a step back. So I talk about pricing for a living. We've written a book about it. If an organisation wants a 45-minute or an hour presentation to a sales team just to illustrate some of the psychological approaches to pricing, I can do that. I can do half-day workshops, but I also work one-on-one with clients and take them through a pricing process, which usually takes somewhere between 6 to 10 half-day sessions. And I'm mentioning this because everything that you've just been talking about there, I think, is vitally important. I start with trying to get them to think about what's their current approach to pricing. So what's their basic pricing philosophy? Because you can only sell one of three things. You can sell your inputs, your outputs, or outcomes. So with inputs, if you're basically doing a cost plus model for your pricing, so you add all your costs together and put a margin on top, you're just selling inputs, whatever they may be. If you're matching what everybody else does in the marketplace, then you're just selling your outputs. You're saying that what I do is no different to what anybody else does. If they're charging a tenner for this, I've got to charge a tenner for this. But I think it's interesting when you start to think about outcomes, the difference that you make, the value that you add, and that's where you have to start thinking about positioning and targeting, and who is it that you're trying to sell this to, and why is it relevant to them, and why would they want to pay more for the value that they're going to get. So that's a really important starting point for me, is figuring that out, because positioning is everything and targeting is everything. If it helps, just to fill that out, the rest of the pricing process is there's an analytical step to understand where margin comes from and what value means for the customer. How do they perceive value? What are you trying to achieve with pricing? What are your pricing objectives? All of that goes into decisions around the fundamental pricing strategy or strategies. There can be more than one that you're adopting. Then you've got pricing tactics. This is where you might get into buy one, get one free. But then you've got pricing tactics. And then you've got, how do we communicate a price in a way that makes a higher price stickier? And it's that last area where the psychology particularly comes into play. So that's what the pricing process looks like.
Okay.
But in all of those stages, you've got to think about positioning. You can't do that without understanding your positioning. So everything you say is absolutely right.
Excellent. I'm glad. I love to hear that I'm right. I really do. So what I want to talk about is there's a page on Wikipedia, I don't know if you've taken the trouble to look, on pricing. And it lists something like 38 pricing strategies. And there's some duplication in there. But what I always say to people is, if there are 38 pricing strategies, shouldn't you have one? You know, um, so the one, if they do, like, because you say they basically have a stick a finger in the air and see which way the wind's blowing approach to
Mm.
pricing. Like, it's what can I get away with most of the time, which then when they're told they're too expensive, they don't, because, you know, that's what they thought when they were pricing it, is can we possibly get away with this? The one I'm interested in now is this pricing plus, cost plus pricing,
Yeah.
because I think there is a fundamental issue with that. I've got lots of issues. This isn't even my issue. The
Yeah.
issue is that people are so incredibly bad, businesses are so incredibly bad at actually working out what their costs are, specifically when it comes to sales and marketing. So,
Hmm.
on average, the top 500 companies in the world spend around 30% on sales and marketing. So, they have a cost of sale of 30%.
Mm.
I've never met a business that has factored that into their costs. So,
Mm.
businesses might think they're selling at a 20% margin, but actually they haven't factored in this cost of sales. So, they're losing 10% every time they sell something. So, it seems to me that that is particularly dangerous. The other thing when it comes to price plus is I've never met a business owner who hasn't wanted to be the best in their market. And what I say to them is, you can't provide a Rolls-Royce service on Robin reliant money. But
Hmm.
that is what they're doing. They're trying to be the best and the cheapest at the same time. And is it any wonder that being a business owner is such a stressful business if that is your situation? You're trying to produce the most at the lowest possible cost. So this cost plus pricing strategy, it seems to me, is dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. If you do it well, I mean, if you accurately add up your costs, it does have the advantage of ensuring that you shouldn't have a negative margin because you're always making a sufficient margin to cover those costs if you've added them up correctly. You know.
Yes.
But my issue with it is, well, what the hell are you there for? You know, if all you're doing is taking a few inputs, processing them in some way, and sending them out the door, and what you add value, obviously, you know, from an economic point of view, you're adding value by putting the various bits together, but you're not exactly thinking about it in a value add frame of mind. You're not thinking about the difference that you've made to your customers in any shape or form. Um, and if you develop something that is superior, you know, helps your customers do something better, faster, whatever, and in developing that this new product or service, you're actually able to deliver it slightly. It costs you slightly less to implement than whatever it's replacing. Why should your price go down? Simply because you've now improved your customers' lives with whatever the superior thing is. But because the cost to deliver it has gone down, your prices have gone down. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I I think that it's the most appropriate thing is for people to pay for the value that they've had delivered. This is not about trying to gouge customers. You know, use pricing. In the we saw pricing being abused at the beginning of all of the COVID issues, when suddenly masks that used to be you could get a pack of 10 for £1. Suddenly it was 20 quid to buy one mask or something, and you know you couldn't buy hand sanitizer for less than £50 a bottle. We saw ridiculous price gouging then. I'm not interested in that. I think that's immoral. What I'm interested in is this: if you're an organisation and you're operating on wafer thin net margins after you've taken all of the costs into account, if your margins are 1, 2, or 3%, then you're vulnerable. It doesn't take much of a change in the marketplace to damage your business significantly and possibly even take it under. You haven't really got much money to invest in your team, invest in developing new technologies or anything. You're just about eking by. Yeah. If, on the other hand, you're making a reasonable margin for what you do, net at the end of all of the costs, then you can invest in your people. You can grow the organization, which creates new opportunities. So people got opportunities for promotion. Their career can, you know, carry on through your organization. You can Dyson, Dyson charges a fortune for his vacuum cleaners, but he's created a university for designers, to bring on the next generation of people who create new things. If you're charging a fair amount of money for the value that you're creating, that's where it goes. It goes back into making a secure, successful organization where people can develop rather than just hanging on by the tips of your fingers and hoping that something doesn't happen tomorrow that takes the company under. That's where the pricing comes in for me.
100%. And I think what you're right when you say like the price gouging that went on at the beginning of the pandemic, that comes from this idea that it's supply and demand.
Yeah.
Like the more demand there is, the higher the price, the blah, the blah, the blah. So that's how entrenched it is. And the other thing that's really entrenched is the idea that businesses are supposed to be operating under this ridiculous pressure. Like the more you charge, the more you have to invest in delivering for your customers. This is the Rolls-Royce thing, you know. So if you are charging the bare minimum, you better hope that the bare minimum flies, because if it doesn't, there's no spare to invest anything else in it, you know.
Completely.
Yeah. And so this is really, I think this is really, really important. Okay, so what I recommend to clients is that they have to do the cost plus equation, because they have to make sure there's margin in what they're selling. Because if there's not, they're going to go out of business. So they have to do that. And then I tell them they should also do some competitor type pricing, and they should make sure that they are 10 or 20% more expensive than all of their competitors. And they won't want to do that, so they might negotiate down. But for me, you should always be at least making some margin, and preferably a healthy margin. And then you should always be the most expensive in your market, because then you've got a shot at being the best in your market, because you have got more money than everyone else in your market to invest in providing this solution. And as we've established already, people want to buy the most expensive thing. And we didn't quite say it, but we both thought it. You get a better class of customer when you charge more, because the Rolls-Royce customer will have something else in the garage. You know, if it all goes wrong with the Rolls-Royce and you have to keep it for a couple more weeks, they've still got something to drive around. The Robin Reliant customer, if something goes wrong and you need it for a couple of weeks longer, the wheels have come off in their life, you know. So there's lots of good reasons, I think, for being the most expensive in your market. And that is kind of my recommendation. And that's everything I think about price. So now I'm just going to grill you for the rest of our time together.
I think there are some really important points in that. And this relates into, well, one of the things that I do with the clients when I'm working with them is I've developed a model where I take their P&L, I split it into appropriate chunks, I put it into the model, and the model tells me what their sensitivity to discounts and price increases is. What I mean by that is, when I've modeled a number of different organizations, and when I look at the average, roughly for every 1% discount that you apply, you need around about 3% more sales just to make the same actual pound notes profit. Now, a lot of organizations, they're happy to give 10% away. Well, in every organization is different, which is why I model every client that I'm working with. But looking at the average, that means 10% discount. You need 30% more sales just to make the same pound notes. So really, success ought to look like 40% or something like that. Otherwise, why the hell are you bothering? Why work 30% harder just to make the same amount of money? The converse is what happens when you apply a price increase. Well, you can afford to lose some of your customers. That usually anathema to an organization. Now, the idea that you might lose even one, oh my goodness, the sky is falling in, it's the end of the world. In reality, it's roughly the same ratio. If you had a 3% price increase, you could afford to lose, say, I don't know, 10%-ish of your customer base, and you'd still be making the same pound notes. So you're now working 90% as hard as you used to be and making the same money. In reality, pretty well every single organization that I've ever dealt with, when they've implemented the price increase, almost nobody's even noticed. And this is one of again, this comes back to psychology, but this is the psychology not of the buyer, but of the company and the salespeople within the company. We stress like mad about price increases. We're going to get this pushback, that pushback. We're going to lose half of our customers. This is going to. In reality, it almost never does, because people are staying with an organization because of the level of service, because of relationships, because they love the product, whatever it might be. And they're not abandoning ship simply because of a 2 or 3% increase in price. And as you said right at the top of the podcast, if you do that 2 or 3% increase and you don't lose any business, go straight on the bottom line. So I think there are some really interesting insights that come out of that price sensitivity analysis. We should treat discounts much more carefully than we do. I think companies are trigger happy when it comes to discounting. I'll knock 20% off that, without really understanding what that means in terms of what break even looks like. So I think they're trigger happy when it comes to discounts and incredibly nervous when it comes to a price increase, much more so than they need to be.
Yes. And you've nailed it. Like this idea that the more customers you have and the more transactions you have going on, the better your business is lunacy. Like less is definitely more when it comes to customers and transactions, because the less customers you have, the less complaints you're going to have, the less transactions you have, the less opportunity there is for something to go wrong. So actually providing to a smaller group at a higher margin is in 100% of instances a better business. Of course it is. I mean, but this is just one of these stupid, I don't even want to say myths, because it's a reality that persists because no one questions it. More customers, more customers, more customers. Well, that's more work. That can't be good. Less work has to be better. So it's really interesting. What was the other thing that you were saying that caught my attention there? Yeah, this disparity between the cost of discounting, like the small percentages versus the increase, it's well documented. You don't have to put your price up by very much. And there are, like we've covered this already, there are many facets to this value proposition, like the reliability, the quality, the availability, the delivery, the reputation. There's like 20 or 30 aspects always to this. And price is never the most significant one. It's never the most significant one because, like, immediately, if you go to your customers and say, I'm putting my prices up by 10%, and they say, well, okay, then I'm going to go, well, what would they say? I don't know. So what you have to do always, I think, is temper it against the other aspects of the value proposition. So you can say, okay, the prices are going up 10% across the board for all of our customers. And if they say, well, we can't afford to do that, then you have to go to one of these other negotiation points. You can say, okay, then we can continue to service you at the same price, but we're going to be less available, or the product is going to be less available, or we're going to deliver less regularly, or whatever it is. And this goes back to what you were saying before, where the price has to reflect the value that you're delivering. And the value that you're delivering comes in many, many guises. So that's where I want to get back to. The other thing that I want to say is that there is a caveat to everything that we're saying in this conversation, which is about commoditization, which is by the time you're dealing with a procurement department, you're dead. when all they care about is the price, then that is the only instance. In which case, you should stop selling to those people immediately, because as soon as the price goes down somewhere else, they're going to be gone anyway.
Yeah, you're right. You've got to decide where it is that you want to play. If you're going to target customers who only care about price, then you will be treated like a commodity. Um, I don't want to. I don't want to say that adopting the lowest cost is not an appropriate pricing strategy. It works for Ryanair, you know, uh, but most organisations never even stop and think about their pricing strategy. Ryanair has. They are very clear about the strategy and what it means and how to achieve it. But the thing is, it's very there aren't many companies who can occupy the very lowest price possible. It's generally one company is the lowest, and there might be a couple who are quite close. There are many companies who can adopt a premium position in the marketplace because there are many different ways to target different customers or to present value in different ways or whatever it might be. It's much easier for companies to find something different that they can present some difference in terms of value at the top end than it is to fight over who's going to be the cheapest in the marketplace. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
The thing I think about Ryanair, are they a customer before we start talking about them?
No, no.
Okay, good. All right. They have clearly thought about their pricing. They are the cheapest, but I still don't know. Like, if you think about the way you buy an airline ticket, I don't know because I haven't been on a flight for 3 years. But when you buy an airline ticket, the first thing is availability. Like, who is flying from this place to that place when I want to actually fly? So, okay, so then the second criteria is price. Because so first you look at these are the flights that are available. Now I'm looking at the price. And so I would argue that air travel has largely become commoditized.
I
And
agree.
even in that instance, there will still be somebody on the plane who spent 10 grand to sit in a nicer seat and have a nicer champagne glass, So, even in that instance, it doesn't work. I don't know how successful Ryanair are, but I think in terms of market sentiments, they are the worst off of all of the airlines because everybody knows that you have to pay for every single, and they give the impression now that they are money grabbers. Like they'll be charging for the toilets at some point is the joke. Do you know what I mean? It's like you have to pay for every single thing. They've just broken it down. It isn't necessarily any more less expensive. So I think I'm probably thinking about the customers that I've serviced who are small to medium-sized businesses at best. I think if your business has become commoditized, it's over for a small to medium-sized business because there is always going to be a Tesco's come along and they will undercut you and they will make sure their suppliers aren't making are making losses on what they're selling to undercut you. So I think that's the danger for small businesses. If it's commoditized, it's over. You can't compete. You literally can't compete.
No, the definition of a commodity is the only way to compare one option versus another is who's the cheapest.
Yes.
So if there's no other differentiation other than price, and your customers are buying on price, then you're absolutely right. Trying to be the cheapest all the time is incredibly hard, and it only takes somebody slightly larger to come along who's got a volume advantage compared to you, and you're in business.
Yes.
It's a tremendously precarious place to be, which is why all of the companies that I work with are ones who have some differentiation in the marketplace, and because of that differentiation, they have some value proposition in the marketplace that a competitor might not have, and they're able to charge an appropriate amount of money for that value that they're delivering.
Good.
That's what I like.
Yes, and that's the way it has to be because if there is no differentiation, other than price, you're dead. You are, and it's just a question of time before somebody comes along and wipes you out. You've brought us brilliantly round to the value that you deliver for your customers. And this is diametrically opposed to what businesses think is going on, because they don't think they are delivering value for their customers, because they don't talk to their customers to find out the value that they're delivering. So again, this is going to be a big adjustment for lots of businesses. So how do you put a valuation to the actual value that you're delivering for your customers' customers?
There's a process that I take a business through. It's easier to show people what it looks like. So on an audio medium, we'll do our best. But there are a number of steps. The first step is to understand what are the criteria that a buyer is going to use to choose between you and a competitor. So not why they'll choose you rather than a competitor, but what are the criteria? So it might be stock availability, it might be the size of the range, it might be the number of color options that you've got that can be offered. There might be a whole load of different criteria. You then drill down into why they care about those criteria. Really get to really understand the benefits they're deriving from them. And once you've got a clear understanding of those criteria, you can weight them because they're not all equally important. You can score yourself against them, score the competition against them, and you end up, once you've done this, with a number which is a proxy for the value that you're delivering. Because if you do better at delivering against the criteria, so you score higher than the competitor, then when you've multiplied your score times the weighting, added it all up, you're going to have a higher score. Yeah. So it's a way of trying to mathematically derive an approximation for how much value do we deliver compared to a competitor. And then you can graph that against the price that we're all charging. And what you see is a graph with dots all over it, where there's you versus various competitors, and from that you can then make some decisions about where you might price appropriately. That all sounds a bit esoteric, so let me give you a very concrete example. There's one client I worked with who they repair white goods, so things like washing machines. We did this analysis, and two things came out of it. One was that they were undercharging compared to the competition for the value, for the level of service that they delivered. So they just added £10 onto their price, no change in demand whatsoever. So that's straight on the bottom line. But because we'd gone through the process of really figuring out from the customer's perspective, what does value really look like? What's important to them? What criteria do they use to make a decision? Because of that, we identified a number of premium options that we could introduce, such as specific times of day to come and fix the machine. We identified a number of premium options. We added those into the sales model and rejigged the website, so it presented the most important information to the customer right at the top. We did all of that, and after about 3 months, 50% of all of their sales were premium options, and the premium options had a higher margin than the non-premium options. So that's why I keep using the word value all of the time, and that's a little value process that I take a customer through that applies. I hesitate to use the word science because it's not formal, rigorous science, but it's more scientific than what most organisations do, which is stick that finger in the air and think, I think we're about here in the marketplace, or we're a little bit better than them, or everybody else is charging this, so let's charge that. It's a bit more scientific than doing that, and it gives you some insights into what you might do with price and what you ought to do with how you might adjust the value that you're delivering.
Brilliant. You're right. It's not scientific because there is still room for them to think, oh, but we do this better, or but we do that better, and they won't really know.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes back to like really good marketing, which is just having a better relationship and a better insight into the challenges or the desires of your customers.
Totally right.
And what you were saying at the beginning is that this doesn't get anywhere near as much attention as it should.
Because of what I do, the portfolio marketing director, all of the experience I've had, because of all the clients I've worked with one-on-one with on pricing, I've seen quite a lot of organizations now, and I've seen the marketing structures inside those organizations. I've only twice in all of my time come across anybody that had specific responsibility for pricing inside an organization. Generally, it's the sales director that ends up having responsibility.
Oh,
But it's I know, but because they're the ones who are facing the customer and they've got to actually negotiate and whatever. It's a little bit of responsibility tacked onto his sales responsibility. It's not because they have any expertise in pricing. It's not because they sit down there at their desk 8 o'clock in the morning and think about, okay, what am I going to do to optimize pricing for my organization today? Only twice in all of that time have I ever met anybody inside an organization with that specific responsibility. The vast majority of organizations, and a lot of them are SMEs, but there are some big ones too. The vast majority of organizations, when I start working with them, they say, we've never even thought what the hell our pricing strategy is. We don't even know what a pricing strategy is. Never mind what ours is. We've never stopped and thought about this at all. And that's why I think pricing is the neglected P, because every one of them has thought about positioning to a certain extent, perhaps. They've definitely thought about how we're going to promote ourselves, what marketing we're going to do. They all know what product they're selling. Ask them about price then.
yeah, nothing. And what is the thing about that? This is the thing that will make the biggest difference to your profitability the most quickly.
Yeah.
I don't know this is what I would say to any business that I went into when I was doing the effective marketing company properly and visiting people in their businesses. It's just put your prices up. Put your prices up by 50%. No one was ever going to do that. But, the same amount of work for more money should be a no-brainer for businesses. It absolutely should. Having more to invest in delivering value for your customers should be a no-brainer for businesses. Having more to invest in winning sales should be a no-brainer for businesses. But the resistance to this is insane. Like, this is probably... It probably levels with telemarketing, tell people to get on the phone and start making cold calls. They'll resist that as much as they will resist adjusting their prices. Yeah, I think it's crazy.
Yeah. And it comes back down to confidence and fear. There's that fear that they will adjust prices and they'll get some pushback. They're not confident to do it. They're worried about losing that one customer out of 100, and not recognizing that a 3%, doing the maths, 3% price increase, lose one customer, I can guarantee you're going to be better off.
Yes. And the thing is that you're going to lose the cheapest customer. You're going to lose the customer that values you least. You're going to lose the customer that was most at risk. And it comes back around to this idea that more customers is better. Like they do that 80-20 thing on customers. Like 20% of you, the lowest paying 20% of your customers are causing you 80% of your issues, because they're also operating under pressure if they have if their world is dictated by their finances, because their finances aren't right. It's not because they're flying, they're doing well, all their customers are happy, all their staff are happy. It's because their finances aren't right, because they're probably not charging enough. So that the whole situation is under pressure. Okay. Yeah, that is the idea of. I mean, it all goes back to this same thing: is understand your customers better.
Mhm.
Understand what they are, what they value, and this idea of charging premium rates for those new things is absolute genius. Because you know
Mhm.
what? How I feel when I pay a premium rate for some special attention is I feel like I'm a special person who deserves special attention. I don't
Yeah.
feel, oh, that cost me a tenner. Like people do it. Do they do it on these delivery services, on Amazon, on eBay, or whatever? You get priority treatment. They do it every time they decide how much they want to pay for the delivery. Do I want it in a day or 2 days or 4 days? Yeah, I'd be really interested to see data on that. The truth is that people who are paying don't care about the price. I mean, I don't know the science of it or the psychology, but I want to say that beyond thinking they're getting the deal is what's important. That's what I want to say. As
Mhm.
long as they feel like they're getting the best deal, then they will be happy. And it doesn't matter actually how much they're paying for that deal. It's the deal that is important, and that there are facets to that deal that are important.
Yeah, I agree. But again, there are so many aspects to this. Um, it's partly it's the if you mean by the deal, you feel like you're getting something a bit special. Absolutely great in certain circumstances. Um, that's true, and that's often what I'm talking about when I talk about making sure that you're providing the appropriate value, and then charging an appropriate price for it. But it goes the other way, with regard to deals. Who would buy a sofa from DFS at full price? Because in the UK, um, there's always a sale on. And the
Yep.
only time there's no sale on is when legally they've got to have a period at the full price so they could go back to having the sale on.
Yep.
Um, I like eating chocolate. I consume a lot of chocolate, and if I go into Tesco's, there's Cadbury's caramel bar, gorgeous, and it normally costs £1.50, uh, but roughly 50% of the time, and it's like a month on month off. Roughly 50% of the time, Tesco's have got it on special rollback price, whatever it is that they like to call it, but special price £1. And it is absolutely regular as clockwork. £1.50 half the time, £1 the other half the time, on off. They've trained me never to buy that chocolate at £1.50. I can afford the 50p extra. It's that 50p is not the end of the world to me, but because they run discounts that often, they've now conditioned me to not buy that chocolate unless it is £1. Because I now expect, and I'm doing air quotes now, I now expect that deal to be in place.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
are
the
you
stuff.
stockpiling?
Yeah, yeah. I could show you the stash.
Okay.
Yeah,
So here's what I
there's
think.
that
Uh,
deal. Half of my shopping basket is chocolate.
Okay, so here's at one point in my life, I had the misfortune or the misfortune to be selling mobile phone service
Yeah,
to businesses. Now, mobile phone service is pretty commoditized.
yeah,
Essentially, we were just a reseller. We had the deals from all of the people. We had all the same phones. It was all the same, all the same, all the same. And so it was really difficult to sell. Like we were going to visit businesses, and so the differentiation was me. Like I'm going to come. Quite often we were selling to businesses, so we might go and see them on a job and have the chat while they're having a cup of tea and a break, and then we would go and deliver the. Do you know what I mean? So it was like you don't have to take time out on your Saturday morning. We'll come. We'll sort this. So that was the big differentiator. Except, of course, that people are canny, especially those kinds of businesses. So what they would do is they would get us to come out, they would get us to give them the very best price, and then they would go back to their current supplier and say, okay, these guys have offered it at this price, you must be able to do it at this price. If you do it, then then we'll continue to do the deal with you. Except the only way to get this deal done on the day, you have to get it done on the day, because if you leave, they're going to go and do it somewhere else, so it has to happen right there and then. So what you do is you sit down and you do the calculation, like what are you paying currently, what phones have you got, what blah, 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 blah. What you have to say if you want to do that deal is literally, but these guys could have done you a much better price than this. Like these guys, whoever they are, have basically been overcharging you by 20%. How long have you been with them? 10 years you've been with these guys. Well, no wonder they're overcharging you. So once you plant that seed that they're ripping you off, they're never going to do business with that customer ever again in their lives, and it doesn't matter now what price I give them, because those other people were ripping them off, So typically I could beat their current price because they were getting ripped off already and they were getting me. And so that's how the business worked. Until I realized you have to say that to them, and there was a particular point in the conversation and a delivery and a da-da-da-da-da, you wouldn't ever get a deal. So that is where price becomes really important, is where people get a sense that they might be getting ripped off. In that instance, then price becomes really important again, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And it just makes me think about insurance companies. Because car insurance and stuff like that, because everybody shops around now for the absolute cheapest deal, and they do it almost annually. Well, I say everybody. There are a group of people where inertia takes over, and they just stay where they are. But loyalty isn't rewarded anymore. Now the insurance companies, it costs a lot of money to acquire a new customer.
Yes.
The best thing for an organization is to have very high retention rates, and yet the insurance industry has massive churn because for I don't know, a couple of decades at least, they've had all of there's always a special deal for somebody who's just about to join them that disappears after they've been with them for a year or two.
Yeah.
So they're training customers to churn, and churn costs money. And whoever came up with it first probably thought that they were being smart. Hey, we'll steal everybody else's customers. We'll have a special discount for new customers for the first year. But it's like an arms race. The reason it's an arms race and not an arms win for one country over everybody else is, as soon as one country does it, everybody else has to follow suit in order to maintain the status quo. And that's what's happened. And it destroyed the industry to a certain extent, I think.
Yeah, to a certain extent. And that's maybe the best example of commoditization, because really nobody's buying insurance because, everybody's buying insurance to satisfy the legal requirement to have car insurance. Nobody's buying it for fun. Nobody's buying it because, so that is, and you're right. And I don't understand why those businesses don't understand about the cost of customer acquisition. If you spend money on acquiring a customer and you make depreciating amounts per customer because you have to keep driving the price down, of course the business is going to become less and less and less profitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just insane. I don't understand that at all.
It's because one company did it at the beginning, I'm sure, and then as soon as one company does it, everybody has to follow suit.
Yeah.
I've talked to distribution companies, and there was one who was saying that they were planning to test free delivery for a period. They're going to try it out for 6 months and see whether that made a difference. And I said to them, well, you can't test it, because once you've introduced it for 6 months, your competitors will follow suit. And once they've followed suit, you can never undo it. If you want to test it, the only way to test it is to find a small geography, to do something very limited for a short period that you can unwind quickly, and you can see whether it does make any difference. But it's incredibly dangerous. As soon as one company does anything like that, it's embedded, because everybody follows suit. You can't unwind it.
Why do they think that people want free delivery? Two things. Why do they think that people want free delivery? And why do they think that people aren't going to realize that they're just making up the cost somewhere else because it still has to be paid for? If I'm having something delivered, I would prefer to pay and know that it's actually going to be delivered personally. If I'm having something delivered, then I'd like to be able to track it, and I'm prepared to pay to be able to track it, to know that it's actually going to arrive. So this is probably the worst case, like where people are offering something for free. Why? How? It can't, but where do you get to in your mind, in your business, when you say there is so little value in what we're doing, we're not going to charge anything for it? That's...
And delivery is kind of a core part of the service for.
Yeah. You can buy this thing, but there's no guarantee it's actually going to arrive at your house. How do you feel about that? I'd rather pay a few quid and actually have it arrive, if you don't mind.
Free itself is one of the psychological things that I talk about with regard to pricing. You should never apply free to the core product or service that you offer. But a hell of a lot of companies already do a number of things that are included, and they stop talking about them. And just bringing them clearly to the attention of the customer at the point where you're quoting a price. There's the price, and you get free this. So these should be things that have a genuine perceived value for the customer, but are at low cost for you to deliver, and not connected with the core product or service that you're actually selling. But given that they do all these things for free anyway, let's talk about them at the point at which you're quoting, because it's a differentiator then between you and the competition.
Yeah.
And you're not giving anything new away. You were doing it anyway.
But does anybody believe in 2022 that anything that comes from a supplier is free? That the cost of it isn't being... I mean, I know they say this in like copywriting and stuff, then the word free is really powerful. And the other thing I think is that, do you want quality customers or do you want cheapskate customers? Because
absolutely, that's why you don't apply it to the basic thing that you're doing. You to come back to what I say. Fair price for the value that you are delivering.
Yes,
I want to deliver value, so I do completely agree. But given that a lot of companies have got these things that they're including, make sure that people know about them. Just make it absolutely clear. But it is the whole thing around free. You're right. We all know that you don't really get anything for free. But again, the research, it does show that we are influenced by that.
Yeah, but I think we are, because there are people who are buying Rolls Royces. Yeah. So I think if you were to sell somebody a Rolls Royce and say, oh yeah, but you get a free air freshener, a free this and a free... then at that point, surely it becomes offensive. Like, I'm spending 8 times as much as I need to on a car. I don't need a free air freshener. So I think there's something about that, is that you, like, in all these, like, so in digital marketing, they call them lead magnets. Like, you get a free report, you get a free assessment, you get free something else. What you attract is freeloaders, I think. And you don't want or need that in your business, because you're in business to make money. People having an expectation that they're going to get something from you for nothing, I think is really dangerous. There's also a whole psychology about the presentation of prices. So you have 3 prices, and typically you accentuate the one in the middle, and that's the one that people will go for, and all of that stuff.
Well, people go for the middle of 3 anyway. That's called the Goldilocks heuristic.
Okay.
If you send 3 prices, start with the highest one first. That's a price anchor. So they look at the biggest number, and then everything becomes compared to that.
Yes.
4-digit prices, if you miss the comma out of it, around about a half to 2/3 of people then process it as a it's easier if I actually tell you the number. So let's say I'm presenting a price 3,924, 3,924. If there's a comma there, everybody reads that as 3,924. But without the comma, around about a half to 2/3 process the number as 3,924 or 39,24. Well, 3 and 39 are less than 3,000.
Yes.
So the price presentation is important, and there are little subtle things that make prices feel bigger or feel smaller to the reader of the price.
Like the 7 is much smaller than the 9. So if it ends with a 7 than a 9, that's why everything online is 297 or 197 or 97 or 47. It's fascinating. This whole thing is fascinating. But the most fascinating thing about it is that businesses don't think about it. They don't do
Yes.
it. It's insane.
Yeah. It's neglected.
Yes. There is one other thing that I want to say, which is I think part of the reason that people think it's so important is because people will ask, like the buying signal will always be, how much is it? Or if you've got a new car and your neighbours catch you walking into this house, they'll be like, how much is it? Or do you know what I mean? If you've got a new thing, people will ask, how much is it? So I think that people think that the price is really important because it's the first thing that occurs to you to ask. But I think in that instance, they're asking something different. I think they're asking, is that available to me? Like, do I have enough money for that thing, that car, that drone, that holiday, that whatever it is, that bike? And I don't think they're making a judgment as to the value of the thing in the first instance. I think they're making a judgment about, he's got that thing, I wonder if I could have that thing.
Yeah.
What do you think?
No, you're absolutely right. And this is, again, the importance of understanding the psychology of how we make decisions. One of the things we're influenced strongly by is what people around us are doing, people who we see as our peers or whatever. And that overrides the cost element of the product or the service for quite a lot. Again, there's a bit of research about how strongly we're influenced by what we see other people doing. There's a researcher called Robert Cialdini. This was out in somewhere in America. I think it was California. He went to a region, a borough, and surveyed all the homes there, the property owners, and asked them what would motivate them to conserve energy. Is it to save money because it's important for the environment, because it's all about the future of the kids, or because the neighbours are doing it? And everybody said 1, 2, or 3. No, not a single person said because the neighbours do it. And then he went out into a number of other areas in the town, suburbs. Went to a number of these places, tried every single test that he could, every single setup, everything to try and get people to recycle more and conserve energy because it saved them money, or for any of those other reasons. Nothing made a difference. The one and only thing that influenced anybody to conserve more energy was knowing that the neighbours were doing it.
Yes. And they've done these tests in hotels, haven't they, where they've said about washing the towels and things. 90% of guests only have their towel cleaned every other day. You know, that is that kind of messaging. It's really interesting. It's fascinating. It's really fascinating. And of course, Cialdini in the book, Influence, like one of the first stories is about the jewelry that goes on sale and gets doubled in price rather than halved.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, like I said at the beginning, I think the truth about pricing is almost exactly the opposite to what everybody thinks. And there is so much opportunity in pricing and people aren't doing it.
Yeah. I would say in most organizations, 90% of the time that people spend thinking about pricing is how we can execute a discount of some kind, or a sale, or an offer. And they don't think about what's the optimum price that we can charge. How do we present it in such a way that we make the highest price stickier? And how do we improve the price in the future?
Yes. And handling the price objection. I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently Mercedes-Benz, for a period of time, taught their salespeople to respond to the question, can I have a discount? Is you need to understand that when you're buying a Mercedes-Benz, you are buying a premium product. And if you like to get a discount on the products that you buy, may we suggest that you go and visit the nearest BMW dealer, because they will 100% give you a discount. At which point everyone says, I'll take the Mercedes at full price, please. So it's like, if people, this would make such a difference to so many businesses. If people if people thought about pricing on the way in, it would make a huge difference. But if they just thought about pricing with respect to discounts, it would make a huge difference. I mean, imagine if your standard is to give people 20% and you stop doing that, you would be 20% better off bottom line. That is insane. How many new customers do you have to bring in to increase your bottom line by 20%? The truth is, it doesn't matter how many customers you bring in. You're never going to do that, because the margin is the same for all of those customers. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. I never tire talking about my favourite subject. So
okay, good. I'm really glad.
much.
The question we didn't ask is, if people want to do better with their pricing, what should they do? I feel like you've kind of answered that question a little bit. But the obvious right answer to that question is they should phone you.
Yes, I'll take that one. Yeah. So number one, phone me. I think if I were to give two core bits of advice, it would be discount less, discount only in extremis. If you halve the amount of time that you're discounting for whatever reason, you'll do better, and be more courageous about applying a price increase, because it's not going to be as bad as you think. They're the two simplest bits of advice. But if you want to do it a little bit more scientifically than that, then you're happy to talk to anybody.
Fantastic. And the thing about this is, what's the thing that just occurred to me? It's like you're never far, like from my mobile phone story, where there is some deception, because if I ask for a 20% discount and you give it to me without squeaking, the way my mind thinks is, okay, they could always have given me this 20% discount. So before the 20% discount, they were essentially ripping me off. Now, you and I know, because we've seen enough pricing, that they weren't ripping you off. They're actually now giving it away. But that's the way I feel. Like Black Friday, the way I feel about Black Friday is, if you can charge 30% less on that day, charge 30% of all year round, because like you say, you teach people to respond to those offers. Okay. Question number 4, books that you would recommend. What should people read?
There are two I'm going to mention. Well, 3 if you want to include mine. How to Price Your Platypus.
How to Price Your Platypus. Don't feel like we spoke enough about platypuses.
Yeah, I'll mention the platypus quickly, and then I'll come back to the books. It's called How to Price Your Platypus because there is no price for a platypus. You can't market it, and that therefore is a metaphor for the pricing challenges that companies face. Lots of companies they do struggle. Exactly where should they pitch the price? Nobody wants to be too cheap and leave money on the table, or too expensive and lose a sale. So the platypus is a bit of a metaphor for that, but it's also something that hopefully is nice and memorable and sticks in people's minds. They remember the platypus guy.
Okay.
In terms of books, because I think so much of this is driven by our hidden psychology, the 2 books I would recommend. One is called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He's an Israeli psychologist. He and his partner Amos Tversky did a lot of the foundational work on how we make decisions post-war, and he writes beautifully, and it is just incredible stuff. It's mind-boggling how weird we are when we think that we're really sensible. The second is a book by a guy called Nick Kolenda, Kolenda with a K, so Kolenda, called Methods of Persuasion. And again, it's similar kind of thing, but it's more applied. So Kahneman's book it's a psychology, easy reader if you're interested in psychology, whereas Methods of Persuasion is, how do we take that and how do we apply it to the real world and the kind of things that we marketers do, because everything that we do in one way or another, whether it's pricing or anything else, is really about persuasion.
100%. Excellent. I haven't read any of those 3 books. I'm going to get on a mission to do that. Okay, so last question. Who are you going to throw under the bus that we might be able to persuade to have a conversation with me?
Oh, there's a couple of people I know, and I'll happily do an introduction that I think would be interesting for your listeners. There's a friend called Alistair Greener who talks about influence and also talks about presentation skills and how to have the greatest impact when you are presenting. And a lady called Michelle Mills Porter, who is an expert in people and has developed a number of tools and apps that you can use to gain an insight into what motivates other people, how they like to be addressed, what methods of communication work best with them. So if you're in the job of marketing or in the job of selling and you deal with other people, she is an expert in helping you to understand those other people. So I think that they're
Fantastic.
quite interesting guests.
Excellent. And are you able to organize like a LinkedIn type introduction like Warren did for us?
I will do that. Yeah.
That would be perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No problem.
I've been wanting to have this conversation forever because, like you say, there's not many people you can have this conversation with. They don't exist. Like I had a client who was doing this years ago, but as far as I can make out, he's gone back into work, so he's not doing it anymore. And then I don't know anyone else who talks about this or does this, which is insane because I know 40 PPC consultants and I know I don't know 100 SEO people, but I don't know anyone who does this specific thing, which is the thing which will have the biggest effect, the biggest positive effect, the most quickly.
Yeah.
It's insane. Okay, so we'll do the pretend goodbye now, if that's okay, and then I'll stop the recording, and then we'll say goodbye like normal human beings.
Well, in that case, pretend goodbye.
Pretend goodbye to you. Thank you so much for your time, man.
Been lovely. I hope this has been interesting for all of your listeners, and I've thoroughly enjoyed the past hour and a bit. And yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on.
It's only a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.